Couple more posts here. Someone made a post on a Facebook group. His position is that the whole state of New Hampshire is behind this. As an example, Claude Moulton ripped out the carpet in the A-frame between February 9th and February 15th. Huh. So apparently here's a copy-paste of this post. Obviously the name of the person is not going to be put here, but this is the post without the name. I don't have the name. It was copy-pasted here. So potentially there's multiple layers of cover-up by law enforcement in this case. I commented that I agree 100%. In my opinion, the law enforcement and the DA cover-up is at all levels. In order to explain the position, I will give you the executive summary, followed by multiple bullet points questioning the integrity and plausibility of the investigation regarding Maura's disappearance 17 years ago. The simple answer is that there are multiple suspects that are either a member of the law enforcement community in New Hampshire or have an association with the integral decision makers regarding the case. Additionally, if Haverhill PD did want to go forward with an indictment, they would have to work through the Grafton County DA. The DA at the time was related to one of the potential suspects in the case. In 2008, Fred Murray filed with the court to release the records in the case. The court denied his request. At the time, Strelzin said that the case was 75% solved. It appears that nothing has been done for years in the case. To understand the missteps and questionable actions and inactions of these decision makers, you have to review what events happened on the timeline. The bullet points listed below should provide a thought process to support my position. I will try to be brief and to the point. They are not all of the bullet points that I could provide. I could provide numerous additional points if there is an interest. In reviewing evidence and comments over the last several years, most people are totally excluding law enforcement as potential suspects or contributing factor in Maura's disappearance. To have a better understanding of the culture in the area, you would refer to the 2004 Haverhill Town Meeting Notice that includes the excerpt, Haverhill, New Hampshire is a town of less than 4,000 people in 2004. The crime stats for 2004 include 3 kidnappings, 11 forcible fondling, 1 rape, 2 impersonations, 67 cases of intimidation, 2 cases of proposition, 72 simple assaults, and 8 statutory rapes. This is reported crimes for 2004. Is law enforcement part of the problem or part of the solution to this case? I have reviewed numerous missing persons and disappearance programs that are on the internet. In very few instances does law enforcement write this type of case off as a runaway. Not only did law enforcement not appear to show any interest in seriously investigating this case, maybe it was because some members of law enforcement already knew the answers. Additionally, there was a misinformation campaign from the get-go regarding Maura's disappearance. This includes that she was drunk or under the influence of alcohol, was involved in an accident in which she struck a tree, had a tandem vehicle following her so she could move on to a new life or succumb to the elements. Who was the party or parties that developed and disseminated this unproven and misleading information? There has been evidence provided that the town of Haverhill had several illegal activities on and around 2004. They included an illegal strip club, illegal drug activity and sales, pornographic movies being made which included willing and unwilling participants, rape, physical assaults, human sex trade, and murder. How could this go on without law enforcement knowing this? If there was significant DEA activity on February 9, 2004, why wasn't Claude Moulton a potential target? There was no proof that Maura Murray was drinking alcohol or was intoxicated on February 9, 2004 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. There was a car off the road near Swiftwater Station around 7 p.m. on February 9, 2004. There was police radio traffic that the person left in a private vehicle. How would law enforcement know that? And if you haven't checked out the MINDSHOCK podcast, the earlier accident, check that out. We go over that. The coincidence theorists desperately want no one to look at that. Haverhill, New Hampshire vehicle SUV-001 was on site where Maura Murray's vehicle was discovered at 7:37 p.m. on February 9, 2004. This was before Cecil Smith arrived at the scene at 7:46 p.m. How come Haverhill PD cannot plausibly explain this? Why did law enforcement call witness A on more than one occasion challenging what she saw? She has never changed her story. Law enforcement spoke to her about making accusations and threatening her with prosecution if she persisted. Another thing that coincidence theorists ignored. The whole out of commission statements, and then all of a sudden, of course, the Oxygen show, the sham Oxygen show changes the narrative to, oh, by the way, it just happened to be Cecil in 001, even though he couldn't even remember. And, of course, Monahan, who was denied at the scene for close to a year or whatever it was, he said it was a sedan. So, okay. Cecil Smith said Maura's car was locked, but witnesses saw him inside the car by the Weathern Barn. At 7:30 p.m. on February 9, 2004, why did Bruce McKay ask someone to take his call to Lincoln and then go into radio silence for over 2 hours? Why did Cecil Smith take 6 days to turn in an accident report regarding Maura's car? That report turned out to be not plausible. And of course, we still don't have the photos he took that night. What do those photos really show if it's just a DUI walkaway? Why did law enforcement not release the ATM footage for 13 years? When it was released, it was only a couple of still photos. I have seen disappearances on the news, and the ATM footage is shown on the same day. I worked with a relative of who was a retired state trooper. The retired state trooper confronted his relative for several years to stop being involved in the case. His nephew is presently a high-ranking member of New Hampshire State Police. 4 years ago... Wow, this is really weird. So this relative of this retired state trooper, he's his brother. So his brother told him to walk away from the case. This is the last time they spoke. The brother, the state trooper, retired state trooper, passed away last year. The nephew told him not to come to the wake or funeral. Simply because he was interested in the Maura Murray case? That's really weird. Again, there's no more details here, so who knows. In April 2004, John Smith was approached by New Hampshire State Police Detective Bruno and Hubbard and told him not to help the Murray family and interfere with the investigation. We went over that again. So, yeah, John Smith was threatened right away, April. So, that's pretty crazy. I mean, we haven't talked about that in a while, but I actually almost forgot that detail. Just another one in yet these bizarre, long line of anomalies and oddities. Why would they care if a PI was assisting in a missing persons case? PIs assist in missing persons cases all the time. Elected State Representative Deborah DeSimone supported the Murray family to have a permanent marker placed at the site where Maura Murray's car was found. She then spoke to Haverhill State Representative Rick Ladd, asking for his support to open an investigation to solve the Maura Murray case. Initially, he agreed to provide his support for this. The next day, he changed his position and told her to back off. I wonder who talked to him and why. Rick Ladd, is that any relation to that other guy, the psychic, the dream psychic Ladd? Is that 2 D's in Ladd? That'd be kind of weird. Why were there discrepancies in the dispatch logs on February 9, 2004? Why did law enforcement call the out-of-turn tow company to confiscate and store Maura's car? New Hampshire State Police, Monahan was at the scene on February 9, 2004. How come he did not report it to his supervisor or fill out a report? And then according to Fred, they denied his very presence for almost a year, approximately a year. That's weird. Just for a random abandoned vehicle? So weird. Why did Jeff Williams call in 7 a.m. on February 10, 2004 to discuss the dispatch logs? Jeff Williams called in sick on February 10, 2004. Suspicious, question mark. Wait a second. So he calls in at 7 a.m. to discuss the dispatch logs, and then whatever was said to him, all of a sudden he's sick and he's not going in that day? That's kind of weird. Search warrant issued for Maura's car on February 10th, 2004. Why would you get a search warrant when you already searched the car? Well, is it common? Okay, what happens in a DUI walkaway? Why would the car be towed? What if she came back? Like, let's say 30 minutes later, her car's already towed? I mean, what's the normal time frame for a tow in that area? I mean, that's weird. All right, here's a big mind shock. I haven't heard this one before. 2 suspected porn producers checked into the Nootka Inn on February 9, 2004, and checked out February 11th, 2004. Were they investigated? They went to high school with Jeff Strelzin and Rick Forcier. I'm going to let that one sink in for a second. And I'll repeat that again, too. So apparently, 2 suspected pornography producers checked into the Nootka Inn February 9, 2004, checked out the 11th. They happened to be high school classmates with none other than Jeff Strelzin and Rick Forcier, of all people. I don't know what to make of that. Now, was Monahan at the Nootka Inn? Apparently, or Cecil Smith? I mean, I remember there was some chatter of certain officers checking that place out that night as well. Claude Moulton removed the carpet from the A-frame sometime between February 9th and February 15th, 2004. Was this ever investigated? I don't know. It's so hard to get any definitive information on that. Thomas Conrad was a friend of some of the potential suspects in the case. There were rumors he was talking about Maura after she disappeared. He was murdered in his front yard by multiple gunshots, 9:30 p.m. The case was never solved. Do they solve any cases up there? It's kind of weird. Cecil Smith was visited by the New Hampshire State Police February 2019. This was the day before law enforcement was going to search a house for possible cadavers. Cecil Smith allegedly committed suicide by shooting himself with 2 guns less than 4 hours after law enforcement left his home. I have never heard of a suicide where the victim had 2 guns. Why did Claude Moulton and go to Maine on February 16, 2004? Was she ever questioned by law enforcement? Supposedly this is his girlfriend, and she's posted on social media about the case and Claude Moulton as well. So she's made herself public, basically, in the case. And supposedly she looked like Maura at the time. I don't think she really looks like Maura anymore, but at the time, supposedly she looked like Maura. Then we have he who shall not be named, the concrete guy. He owned a red pickup truck that meets the same description of the truck seen at the Stagecoach Depot at 7 p.m. February 9, 2004. He refused to let law enforcement search his property, so his family owns this construction company. They're very rich, and supposedly they have ties to state officials as well. We've talked about them to a certain extent. So, other posts here. So it's just the Hollywood, regarding the Oxygen show and possible fakery, the ATM footage. So it's just the Hollywood effect where all these people make money and or further their careers by using Maura Murray's story, but embellishing it with fake stuff. So if this is true, then my guess would be that she or somebody she let use the Saturn hit Vassy on Thursday. After Thursday, many must have helped her get rid of the Saturn in New Hampshire. But somebody who must be involved in this whole thing decided on Monday, when Vassy might die and there might be major jail time, that Maura Murray was expendable. UMass has the answers to much of this. Another post, the Supreme Court has decided that law enforcement can lie to the public. We weren't there, but even when Billy Roush arrived in Haverhill, the police could have told him that they have DNA and fingerprints and CCTV footage that he was in UMass and New Hampshire on February 9th. It could be complete horse expletive, but it was an attempt to see if there are liars in the story. Even when law enforcement told the Roushes that Maura was headed to Ohio, possibly a total lie. Ever since day one or thereafter, Fred and family believed that Maura met with foul play, even though there is no shred of it anywhere. Later on, law enforcement had tried to backpedal and appear to have done XYZ and treat it as though they have a major criminal case on their hands. It would not surprise me at all to believe certain things are fabricated to perpetuate their lies. Any of it. No one knew that Vassie would survive. It's quite possible a UMPD officer may have struck Vassie in the Saturn that evening, and when it happened, it was an expletive moment. The only person to know who was in the Saturn was Maura, the dead giveaway. If any of this scenario turns out to be true. The family of Erickson Akori, which Maggie has never spoke about, who died as a result of being a UMPD CI, lost her lawsuit to the college years later when she found out her son died as a direct result of not knowing police hired her son to rat out other students. No one knows if Maura was in that circle, but the association to it seems highly suspicious. Another interesting point, though, if the Oxygen show was on the up and up, why wouldn't they even mention that, or UMPD CIs? Obviously, it would make UMass look bad. So clearly it was a sham documentary. The only money being involved here would be lawsuits against the police or the school. Big money. That could be a major motivation to be quiet. However, most of these scenarios have to fit multiple boxes where other situations have to make sense in the entirety of everything that has occurred also. More posts here. Also, as mentioned by other astute observers, the Oxygen show, as headed up by Art and Maggie, vehemently argued their points for the info they invented for public consumption for their TV show. They went to CrimeCon with evidence that was denied in court to Maura's father. Where did they get anything? Art stated himself, and this was true, that even in his history as a U.S. Marshal, there's no significant pull to retrieve any withheld info in any case, because he keeps pretending he's just a private citizen. He said that numerous times about him and Maggie. We're just private citizens. And yet they have all this evidence that was denied to a missing person's father. This tells me that any info they tried to push to the public is fake. BS, nonsense, tomfoolery, expletive. They have even pushed this BS onto the family itself. And it all mysteriously reared its ugly head near the start of the Oxygen production. It's obvious as obvious can be. There has never in history been a case where the state handed over withheld evidence to a TV production for entertainment purposes. People have to really think about the premise and realize you have been lied to. Another follow-up. I recall Aaron Larkin seemingly questioning the liquor store receipt showed at CrimeCon. I remember the point being made that unless someone had a receipt from Liquor 44 from 2004 or that time period, it would be impossible to compare and contrast it to what a receipt from the same store looked like if a purchase was made today. It's funny looking back on it now that the receipt had to have the items purchased redacted. Were these secret items that the public just can't know about? I call BS on the receipt too. The ATM footage, like the receipt, was a prop used for the TV show. Another point here, though, if there is someone on the footage with Maura, or possibly not Maura at all, they would have to know what was purchased. So if Maura Murray was with someone, and law enforcement believed whoever she was with at UMass harmed her, then they might redact certain items because they wouldn't want a false confession. Because if somebody was with Maura, they could probably state what they bought on the receipt. But why not redact the entire receipt? I don't know. A lot of it doesn't make sense. More posts here. It would only take 5 minutes for a middle school student to Photoshop the liquor store receipt. And even the chance it was real, it's very possible it was linked to when Fred and the girls went to the liquor store the Saturday, February 7th trip. UMPD had to confirm it with Fred on his police statement. Then easily alter the timestamp and redact items that don't fit, all to make the narrative work in the eyes of the public. Since Maura is literally the only person to deny or accept any of these actions, all this tomfoolery has to be accepted with the idea that Maura is no longer here and that they know this. There are a few things that hang in the balance between the Saturday evening events, this Toyota crash, Fred dropping her off at UMass, and the Saturn in New Hampshire. Meaning if this was all a setup and a hoax, someone got the items into the Saturn in order to force the narrative at least a bit. If Maura didn't go near the Saturn, even since a week prior, someone got the wine box, her books and homework, and accident papers into the Saturn. If the Saturn was already off campus since, let's say, the Vassy hit, and possibly in New Hampshire already to be hidden or staged later, then someone had to go to New Hampshire that same weekend to set it all up. And we do have people circling the case who admitted to being in the area. Someone also asked if they found any receipts from that for ATM withdrawal. Huh, that's curious. Huh. Another post, if the public can't see the footage of Maura in the liquor store from Monday, February 9th, why can't we see the footage of Maura purchasing wine with Kate from Saturday, February 7th? After all, UMPD did know about this stop and thought it was important enough to ask Fred about it. Is Saturday, February 7th just as important as Monday, February 9th? That's a good point. And you would think, because you have all these other missing persons cases, in order to present the timeline, a lot of these shows and documentaries do show footage from a day or two or three before their disappearance as well, just to establish the timeline. So, why? Yeah, that's a very good point. Why not show the footage from the Saturday night? Why is all of the liquor store footage shrouded in secrecy? Another post here regarding the denial of all of this information to Fred in his 2006 lawsuit. I think the key giveaway on this is truly the point of the state of New Hampshire allowing certain of pieces of evidence out of their sealed and withheld evidence that they refused to Fred in 2006. Their refusal was based on a strong set of laws and rules that they gave as their reasoning. So, of course, yeah, why would they change that? In light of that, it's entirely possible that anything allegedly released since then is fake and or photoshopped for a damn TV show. Art and Maggie were private citizens. Being a former U.S. Marshal gave him no special access, or at least according to him. And if the state told Fred no, then there is no way they would cherry pick other items to give them. If it is true, Fred would certainly have a very strong lawsuit. Or these things had already been handed to the family before the trial. It would be important to know. Although he may be mistaken, in the Tim and Lance episode with Rick Graves, he said Kathleen had viewed the liquor store video. It doesn't seem plausible, and Kathleen never mentions this anywhere if I remember correctly. I think that, there was talk of shoes though. Was that shoes from liquor store footage? I don't know. I wonder if anybody can nail that down. Did Kathleen mention the liquor store footage or being allowed to see it? And how would we verify that that was legitimate footage? And what was the date of that viewing? If I remember correctly, I kind of remember it was early on, in which case maybe the liquor store footage really does show Maura. Maybe it was edited. If there was someone with her, they only showed a portion of it where the person with her wasn't right next to her to make it look like she was alone. I mean, who knows? I don't know. That's pretty weird. Fred could have easily sued Hadley first to get information on the first accident and show his daughter had disappeared as a possible result of not being medically checked out after a crash. I was in a winter crash many years before Maura's accident, and fire EMT arrived first. Then Fred could easily sue the state currently for disseminating personal info that was locked out to him in 2006, but was given to private citizens and an entertainment TV show. Unless for Oxygen he signed off on any future litigating matters, i.e., the sexual assault allegation on national TV. It may seem the latter might be a reason why we haven't seen anything. That's a great point. Why didn't he sue Hadley? And there's no questions are answered about that crash either. Is this the only missing persons case in history where all of the actions of the missing person are shrouded in secrecy and all CCTV footage is held under lock and key, not just the day of the disappearance, but in the days prior? I mean, Karen Mayott's report from Thursday night is still sealed. What could possibly be on it? Here's another good point, though. Someone countered with this. I'm thinking now that if law enforcement has any footage of Maura at a liquor store, it's from Saturday, February 7th, when Maura and Kate picked up wine at Liquors 44 in Hadley, as Fred recalls before they dropped him off. After all, UMPD asked Fred about this stop and nothing about Monday the 9th. That's a good point. If they did show Kathleen footage from a liquor store, how would Kathleen know if it was from Saturday versus Monday? Yeah, it's all great points. All great points. Further points here. Someone knew, for whatever reason, that Maura was at a liquor store buying alcohol, but that took place on Saturday. Just speculation here, but in order for the whole DWI runaway narrative to work, the stop at the liquor store got moved to Monday, February 9th. I think Saturday, February 7th is just as important as Monday, February 9th. On Saturday, we know Maura stopped at a liquor store and purchased wine, at least from what Fred has confirmed, and later on was involved in a car accident. On Monday, February 9th, according to the official narrative, Maura stopped at a liquor store, purchased more booze, and then was involved in another car accident. The problem is none of what happened or didn't happen on Monday, February 9th has been confirmed as involving Maura. Bottom line, I think it's very possible someone wanted to bump Maura's stop at the liquor store up from Saturday to Monday, as it just fits the DWI runaway narrative better. I mean, let's take a step back just for a second. Is there any plausible reason not to release the liquor store footage? Because if the ATM footage was not released and they had whatever reason to... I mean, what she was wearing was already listed on her missing persons flyer. So if law enforcement was trying to pretend that this was all about preventing false confessions or something of that nature, with the ATM, like, let's forget about the ATM footage taking that long to be released. Let's assume it's legitimate. At this point, what logical reason could there be in holding back the liquor store footage, both from the Saturday night and the alleged Monday stop? I mean, is there any plausible reason? I mean, you have all these other missing persons cases. I mean, you have... I go over Emma Filipoff. There's the footage of her in the 7-Eleven. There's the footage of her in the library. You can basically match up these footages. Maybe there's more footage. I think there would have been footage at the hotel or near the hotel. I don't know if they released that. But either way, you have multiple pieces of evidence released, multiple CCTV footages. So what would be the harm if the ATM footage is there and it's already established what she's wearing and how she has her hair? What would be the harm in releasing the liquor store footage? It doesn't seem there's any logical reason to not release it. And that's without getting into why not release it right away. But yeah, it's really weird. Some people are speculating why UMPD didn't ask Fred Murray anything about the Saturn, or why Maura wasn't using her own car the night of the Hadley accident. Some people are speculating that the Saturn was not on campus when Fred visited that weekend, and we went over that possibility. A very, very astute post here on why Karen Mayott's police report can never be released. It makes zero sense to see Fred's statement but not Karen's. No one knows if there were others, Kate or Sarah. There must be something in Mayott's report that is risky to see. If it's a possible future court case, how is it that she can tell her story on a podcast? Because it will never be a future court case and was determined early on to never be. Another response, in my opinion, it has to be the times when all of this was happening and even perhaps other names like the supervisor who told her about Maura, or the cadet who might have been hanging around. This would also pinpoint times to look at any security cameras which were in the lobby where Maura was working and the parking lots. Interesting that the lid got closed on many avenues of questioning right away, which can only mean something was up very quickly considering it was a DWI walkaway or a suicide attempt. And again, yeah, I think the footage from UMass, all of the footage from campus, the common areas, the parking lots, we could see if the Saturn was there, and then of course the ATM and the liquor store footage. I think this case could be solved if all those footages were simply released. And I think it's very telling that they're not, as opposed to all these other missing persons cases. So a lot of bizarre oddities surrounding the Oxygen show, as always, and unanswered questions, unreleased footages. I mean, is it curious that they didn't even want to use the liquor store footage in the actual series? They only had a brief snippet for the trailer, which came out, however, many months prior, or a week, whatever it was, prior. Did they not have an established narrative they wanted to push, or they weren't 100% sure? I mean, there are so many curiosities in this case and unanswered questions. It's unlike any other case. I mean, I really don't know how the coincidence theorists and the Dunning, even the most devout authority-worshipping cultists and the most severely suffering Dunning-Kruger goofs, how they can hallucinate that it's not strange the way this case was handled and how none of the footage is... I mean, there were other cases. The Molly Bish case, the convenience store footage was not released immediately. It was released quite some time after, however many years. But what's curious is, I mean, that case was immediately deemed to be a criminal case, or at least possibly so, whereas Maura Murray was handled as a DWI walkaway. But why not release footage prior? Like, for example, if there was security footage of Molly Bish at the lifeguard stand, obviously there were no cameras there, but let's say there were. I mean, how would it not be released? All these other missing persons cases, you have footage that exists getting released, even from a day before or 2 days before, just to establish timelines to show what the missing person looked like. You have this in almost every case. There's a few exceptions, but never to the extent of what we see here in the Maura Murray case, and that's the point here. So I hope you guys found another edition of MindShock True Crime interesting. Plenty more to come. Believe it or not, we still haven't covered everything. There's still even more to cover. But if you enjoy the podcast, you want to support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Help support MindShock, get more mind-shocking content out there, and keep up awareness, not just in this cold case and missing person case, but many others as well. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like and share this podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.